Guten Morgen, mein Liebchen. I'm your professor, Rudolf Bultmann. And this morning we shall be discussing my favorite subject, form criticism. In this class we will demonstrate how we use form criticism on 3 gospel passages. We do this in order to demythologize them and peel away the incrustations of mythology that has been laid upon the story of Jesus. Once we have demythologized these stories, we will see the true nature of the Gospels as myth, and in so doing, we shall rip away the stupid fairy tales that you were raised with, and turn you into reasonable, rational, secular, and sophisticated. Sorry about that, I get carried away. Now then, let us begin.
Here we are. University of Marburg in Germany, 1923. Time to kick some form-critical backside. Hello, kids. I'm J.P. Holding, a Christian apologist from the year 2013. I'm here to show you how this form criticism stuff is just a bunch of anachronistic hoo-ha. Just teach the class, Rudy. I'll pop in when you say something worthy of rebuttal.
As I was saying, we should begin with this passage from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. You will notice that there is an incongruity between verses 5b through 10 and the rest of the story. Form criticism shows us that the performance of the miracle was originally one story, while the debate with the Pharisees must have been added later. For after all, Jesus nowhere else pronounces forgiveness of sins, other than Luke 7:47 maybe. And why should he do so here in the middle of a healing story, Yeah, Mr. Holding?
Now this is a perfect example of a gross anachronism. It's the sort of thing that gets fixed when you read books like this one, William Herzog's Jesus, Justice, and the Reign of God. Let's begin by asking a simple question. Just who are the scribes and Pharisees Jesus was debating?
I think their names were Ralph and Herman.
No, I mean the role they played in their society.
They wrote stuff down?
No. What I mean is, they were retainers who represented the interest of the Jewish cultists, and by extension the temple in Jerusalem. From their point of view, the temple is the only place where sins can be forgiven and purity restored. Forgiveness of sins was seen as the exclusive right of priests using the sacrificial system. In this context, where Jesus assumes the prerogative of forgiving sins, they see him as an interloper putting himself in the place of a priest or covenant broker for God. Now keep in mind who Jesus is teaching here, mostly poverty-stricken peasants, especially ones like the paralytic who were caught in a bind. They couldn't afford the temple tax which was imposed in order to make use of the temple. So they had not even the possibility of access to God's grace and healing. That also meant they weren't able to work to make money to pay the tax, and around it went in a vicious circle. Now insert the concept of forgiveness and how it relates to the healing. The priests and scribes would see a man who is a living embodiment of the judgment of God, suffering either for his own sins or those he inherited from his parents. So he was permanently excluded from redemptive access to the temple. He couldn't even get there, much less enter it to offer sacrifices. So here's the point. Rather than being an incongruity, the forgiveness of sins discussion fits perfectly into the story. Jesus was hurling a challenge of honor in the face of the scribes by doing something they thought was solely their prerogative. That's all.
Let us move to the next passage. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, verses 15 through 19. Form criticism shows us that verse 17 is an intrusion, for it does not serve as a proper climax to the story. It is addressing the Jews at large rather than the retailers. This is proof that we have here an ideal scene that is completely unhistorical. Yes?
Sorry, Rudy, you're blowing it again. Let's discuss that issue of the coherence of verse 17. The temple, of course, had a treasury, and tribute was collected to support it. Verse 17 is a combination of Isaiah 56:7 and Jeremiah 7:11. Jeremiah lived in the time of Jehoiakim, who constructed a new palace for himself using conscripted labor, and he did nothing to prevent the oppression and exploitation of the people of Judah. Jeremiah's message was like Jesus in that respect. It was to those who oppressed the poor and used the temple as a sort of talisman, assuming that if they were inside the temple or had it around, they would be safe from judgment. Both Jesus and Jeremiah were addressing internal oppression and violence. In Jesus' day, that meant as well those who oppress and exploit the poor by adding to their funds off of the backs of the poor. And there might be a greater irony, too, because in Jesus' day the poor often turned to the sort of social banditry that Jesus' words allude to. In essence, Jesus is suggesting that the real bandits are those who take money from the poor. At the same time, Isaiah 56:7 is in the context of a ministry to outcasts, which of course fits the theme of Jesus' ministry and his advocacy of people like the paralytic. Rather than being foreign to the context, verse 17 fits the situation perfectly.
Are you quite finished?
Yeah, at least until you say something goofy again, which should take all of 30 seconds at this rate.
The final passage for consideration is an extended one. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verses 1 through 15. You will notice that the question asked of Jesus in verse 5 is not answered until verse 15. Instead, Jesus makes a long-winded speech. Ha ha! That makes the artificiality of the composition as clear as day. For who would make a long-winded speech before they answer the question?
You mean apart from you? Look, Rudy, you're just not aware of the form in which challenges were performed. In such conditions, an immediate and direct answer to the question was the last thing that would be offered. To put it in modern terms, it would be like dignifying your opponent by implying that his question deserved an answer. In this cultural setting, the proper response to a hostile challenge is not to answer the question, but to attack the one who asked it. And this is exactly what Jesus does. The long-winded speech before the answer is exactly what we'd expect in that culture.
What the...
Well, I think I've done enough for today. Listen up, guys. If I were you, I'd find someone else to take your New Testament class with. This guy, he's so wedded to his anachronisms that he couldn't find a blue dot in a black haystack. See you around.
Well then, we have some time left, so now I will explain to you why you should not accept the miracles of the New Testament as historical. Observe. Today we are able to flick a switch on and off to make light. Now, how can we believe in miracles when we have that, ja? I knew my mother was right about me having a career as a tennis player.